take a case with your whole heart and you write down every word. And sometimes the remedy jumps out at you, and when it does, you know it's going to work. And then you give that remedy, and then it bears fruit. The patient's suffering is relieved.
Today we have the immense pleasure of welcoming the one and only Roger Morrison.
When you set case after case after case, 40 cases of Gelsemium next to each other, and you begin to study them one at a time for each word, and you start seeing the same word come up in this case, the same theme came up in that case, and then another case, and pretty soon you realize that there's 4 or 5 themes of Gelsemium that nobody's ever seen before, just because you're studying them all together. And then once you did it, then you go, why didn't I do that before? Why didn't anybody do that before?
Holy moly, homies, do I have a treat in store for you today. The one and only Dr. Roger Morrison. We are going to be talking about his incredible new book called Clinically Verified Materia Medica, the Tapestry of Homeopathy. And this is volume 1 that is out now, with volume 2 and 3 being released over the course of the next couple of years. I have already used this book successfully in my clinic in only the 2 months that I have had it. It is a work of art. It is inspirational, and it is going to be that must-have book that all of us will have in our clinics. Like one of those books that you literally cannot run a practice from without this book in your clinic. So if you want to get a copy, go to herrickmorrison.com. That's HERRICK, Morrison.com, and get your copy from there and enjoy the episode. Homeopathy is my passion. It's my everything.
So we did outcome-based research in homeopathy in mobile and rural clinics.
They're the richest people on the planet, and they've always had a royal homeopath since the 1800s.
I think Emerald, it's an extraordinary remedy. It's about the wounded ego.
The plant is becoming extinct. If you've got the remedy, you only need a drop and you can make it for perpetuity.
I use all of the things that are in harmony with the vital force, and I find that they all reinforce each other.
The light body is what turns on the light of the chakras.
Going through that trouble, actually, in the end, there's a gift waiting for you.
If you're going to take a really big remedy, take it at your moon phase return, because your vital force will receive it most strongly.
We need to be able to create a space for them to be able to open up into a greater kind of life.
The one that made everybody cry is the Arctic sea water. It just washes away everything you don't need anymore.
Krypton is just an unbelievable remedy, full of mathematics and astronomy and Tibetan Buddhism and the Bible and aliens, and it all knits together.
It's almost like we're holding grid points out there, and that connection is just incredibly powerful and special.
I used to run a mother and baby clinic, and I would teach the mums how to use homeopathy.
Understanding the symbolic world of the patient is really important, and being able to utilize their dreams.
Working intuitively is about having the knowledge but allowing ourselves to feel that knowledge.
We're going through such a huge transition energetically.
You take a case with your whole heart and you write down every word, and sometimes the remedy jumps out at you, and when it does, you know it's going to work.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout podcast, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. I'm your host, Eugenie Kruger, and you can find me at eugeniekruger.com. Join me on this magnificent journey where we expand the realm of possibility of healing with homeopathy. Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome to Homeopathy Hangout, where today we have the immense pleasure of welcoming the one and only Roger Morrison. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm just looking forward to the interview.
Me too, because you have lived on my desk for 15 years, and you have helped me in over 6,000 cases. So this little book that I'm holding up here, look, it's got the date in there, 2010. It's one of my first homeopathic textbooks that I bought. And you'll see how dirty it is on the outside. And it's the desktop guide Dechinus and confirmatory symptoms, and it literally has lived on my desk. It's the one book, first one I always refer to. So you're going to have to allow me just a little bit of fangirling today, okay? Now, you are probably one of the most famous homeopaths on the planet, and everybody knows who you are, but we have one rule here on the podcast that everyone has to do no matter how famous they are. You have to tell us how you were first introduced to homeopathy.
Oh, that's okay. Well, let's see. I was in medical school, and I'm just going to tell you exactly what happened because it's a little bit kind of intimate. But I had just started in the clinics, and my first clinic just by chance was in the OBGYN section. So I walked in for my very first day, like with my white coat on and my stethoscope properly hung around my neck and, all the things that medical students do. And so there were 9 of my colleagues, from my class were there with me. And we walked into this exam room, and there was a 13-year-old child, African-American girl from a poor family who was coming in for her first checkup because her menstrual period had just started. And the professor turned to the mother and to the child and said, "These young doctors are going to examine you." And we were expected to, each one of us, sequentially do a pelvic exam on this child, who had just started her menstrual period and was scared and disoriented. And Jeannie, I turned around and I walked out of that room expecting to never finish medical school, expecting never to come back to medical school. And I went to my friend, who kind of a mentor, a chiropractor, and I said, "Jim, I'm quitting medical school. Can you get me into chiropractic school?" And he said, and I'm from the South. He said, "Well, Roger," and sort of folks, he said, "I could surely help you get into chiropractic school, and we'd be proud to have you." And he said, "But I hope you don't do it." He said, "Because someday when I'm waking up, from a coma, I would rather be looking at your face than one of these other people." And so I went back and I, of course, finished medical school and my internship and all that kind of stuff. But I was determined I was not going to be that kind of doctor. And so I started looking around for, all the alternatives. I was already interested in alternatives, vitamins and nutrition and things like that, but I'd never heard of homeopathy. And because I was interested, one of my friends handed me a journal called The Laughing Man magazine. It was a journal from Bubba Free John, who later became Da Free John. He was a spiritual teacher, an American spiritual teacher. And in there was articles from 3 Zen Roshis. And I was, I had studied Buddhism when I was in college. And so at the back of that journal was an article by Bill Gray about George Vithoulkas, that he had just been in Greece and had studied with George Vithoulkas. And he was telling about all the miracles of homeopathy and what he had seen and how he was studying with George and, all these cures that he was talking about of rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis. And I read that article and I got about 2/3 of the way through that article. And I said, "What a bunch of BS." And I took that journal and I slammed it into the garbage can and I ate dinner and I went to sleep. And at 2 a.m, I jolted up right in my bed with the words coming into my ears. But what if it was true? And I went and I retrieved that journal out of the garbage can and read it again and sat down in the middle of the night and wrote to George Vithoulkas because his address was in there. And I wrote and I said, "I want to come and study homeopathy." And that's how I became a homeopath. And there wasn't another homeopath within 500 miles of where I lived at the time in Tennessee, in Memphis. So I finally got a letter back from George Vithoulkas, and it was actually a letter from Bill Gray. George said, "Here, I'm sending you a letter from Bill Gray." And Bill said, "Why don't you come to the seminar in Athens, Greece in May of 1978. I was 23 years old and halfway through medical school. And I convinced my dean that I had to go and study homeopathy. It was actually more involved than that. And I went and I sat down I'd never seen another homeopath in my life. I was in Athens, Greece for the first time coming from Tennessee. And I sat down in this class of all these amazing looking physicians and from all over Europe and the US. And George Vithoulkas walked in and just the light emanating from his face. And he started out by saying, "What is healing?" Which no one had ever asked me that question. It was like being a doctor was all about lab tests and, physical exam and x-rays and, making diagnosis. But what is healing had never crossed my mind. And he spoke for 3 hours about what it meant to be a homeopath. And Eugenie, by the time I was done with that lecture and seeing George Vithoulkas and just the incredible inspiration of the man, and I never thought about doing anything else in the rest of my life. So that's how I became a homeopath.
That would have to be one of the best intro stories I have ever heard. I mean, Camilla's story of finding out about homeopathy in a bar, that was pretty epic. But I think this one, I had goosebumps, I had tears, all of it. So you're a great storyteller. And I just have to say,
even before I got to see George, I went into his clinic. I never got to see a single homeopath, but I was in the clinic, which was a real busy place. And I was sitting next to this Greek woman, a tiny room, not as big as my office, with 20 people sitting, waiting to see their homeopaths. And this woman started to speak to me in Greek, which at that time I didn't speak at all, not even a word. And then she had great English, and she said, "Did you come here from America to be treated?" And I said, "No, I'm an American doctor. I'm coming here to study homeopathy." And she got totally, and she said, "Well, let me tell you about me." And she'd had horrible migraine headaches. She'd been bedridden for 20 years. And she told me all about it. She came to the clinic a month ago. She hadn't had a headache since the second day. And she was up and doing things and holding her grandchildren and things she'd never done for 20 years. And while she's talking, the woman next to her sort of elbows her and says, "Oh, who's this?" And I hear her answer something, "American doctor, blah, blah, blah," in Greek. And then pretty soon the entire room, every person in the room was standing in a semicircle around me, getting this woman to interpret and tell me this one had had rheumatoid arthritis, and that one had had multiple sclerosis, and that one had, agoraphobia, and each one of them completely cured. Can you imagine what it was like to be a little medical student walking into that? It was just, I was walking on clouds.
And I just love that how we fast forward 47 years now, and I can do the math because 78 was the year before I was born, where now we have this unbelievable book that says dedicated to George Vithoulkas, teacher, mentor, and father, which is what I am so excited that we're going to be talking about today. Your beautiful Clinically Verified Materia Medica, Volume 1, The Tapestry of Homeopathy. Now, this book I got while we were busy traveling. And so it's actually a little bit of a story because it went to my clinic and then I had to get it posted to the next place that we were going to stop at with our caravan. And when I got it, I cannot tell you how excited I was. And just leafing through it, like smelling it, holding it, you can just see how much love and work went into this. Now, my very first question, apart from how you discovered homeopathy, was going to be, what was your inspiration behind writing Clinically Verified Materia Medica? And I harp on the Clinically Verified Materia Medica because I always call myself a clinician. I have seen a lot of clients over my short period of time, like a decade plus of practice, but clinically, I see things that are not in books. And so I am passionate about clinicians who see a lot of clients, recognize patterns, and then use that information instead of dogmatically doing things as we are told. But your time is very precious. And instead of making you explain this whole story of the inspiration behind this again, you have actually done a beautiful video on YouTube. It's 15 minutes long. Anyone can find it. Go on YouTube, type in Roger Morrison, Clinically Verified Materia Medica, and it comes up. So I have arranged with your clinic managers that instead of making you repeat that whole story, because you did it so perfectly, I am right now going to splice that into this episode. And we're going to cut through to that now where you explain the inspiration behind Clinically Verified Materia Medica.
Hello, friends. This is Roger Morrison talking to you from the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, here from my office, my laboratory. And I'm wanting to introduce you today to my new book, Clinically Verified Materia Medica. I wanted to talk to you about this because homeopathy is based on trust. We have to trust the symptoms that are written down for remedies. We have to trust the prescribers who have used the remedies. So trust is a very important thing. And I want to give you an opportunity to see exactly how this book was constructed so that you'll know the quality of work and you'll be able to decide for yourself the value of the information. So, this all began quite a while ago because I published my first Materia Medica desktop guide in 1994. And that was a big year, 1994. Right after I published the book, suddenly my wife, Nancy Herrick, decided to zoom off to India to spend a whole month studying with Rajan Sankaran. So it was just like weeks after Desktop Guide came out. And she went to India and she came back and she said, "Oh, you have to study this in detail. This is the greatest thing that ever happened to homeopathy." And then right after that, very soon after that, Jeremy Sher started publishing his wonderful provings, starting with Androctonus. And then in short order, Jan Schulten came up with his book on the periodic table, the elements, and everything had changed. And, I had just spent the last decade of my life studying homeopathy probably about as hard as anybody ever studied this field. I'd gone through every important textbook, Materia Medica. I had studied with George Vithoulkas in Greece for 2 years and with his whole crew of teachers. So I had really put my all into learning Materia Medica. And as I finished Desktop Guide, it was sort of like, I'm done with my stuff. I have mastered this field as much as anybody can master the field of homeopathy. And then, bam, I got hit with all sorts of new information that I had no way to evaluate. I mean, it was like, really? And, woe was me. I thought I was all through with the studying part, and here I was studying again. And I got to say, adopting the language of high tech, I'm not an early adopter. Just by nature, I'm not somebody that just jumps into things. In fact, I sort of got dragged kicking and screaming into the study of Rajan's ideas and concepts. And, it took me a long time, but by a decade or a decade and a half later, I pretty much had resigned myself that this was extremely important material and that it had to be included in any modern Materia Medica. And so I decided that I was going to update Desktop Guide and make it more living, more modern through incorporating all the ideas of these very important thinkers in homeopathy. So that was about in 2012 when I started that work. And now is the end of 2024. And so I've gone through a lot since then because I changed my whole mind. In the course of writing this new Materia Medica, I realized that what I wanted to do was something completely different. So it was an evolving process. And it changed steadily over the years. Okay. So now, at the same time, starting in the early 1980s, my fantastic partner and wife, Nancy Herrick, had begun a process of collecting homeopathic cured cases. And she collected them from everywhere. Every seminar that we went to, every lecture that we went to, all of our own cases, all of our colleagues' cases, our students' cases, every journal. She took down every case that came in every journal. And just, she got cases from every corner, and she tried to convince me to do the same thing. Did I mention that I'm not an easy adopter of new things? Yeah. So it took me a little while to get on board. But once I got on board, we started collecting information, cases, lectures from pretty much everywhere. We amassed probably, certainly thousands and thousands of cases. I'm thinking it was probably about 10,000 cured cases that we had accumulated by then. Of course, by now it's much more. And so we were collecting these cases, and to be frank, we had no idea what we were going to do with these cases. I mean, it seemed like a valuable thing to have, but what were we going to do with them? We didn't really know. However, now that I was starting to write the Materia Medica, I had this vague idea that those cases probably would be handy. Although the other part of me was going like, well, listen, we've had this Materia Medica, we've been gaining Materia Medica for about 200 years. We probably have everything we need in the Materia Medica by now. So part of me wanted to use these cases. Part of me was like, not too sure. And I remember that at the beginning, as I was writing the Materia Medica, A to B to C to D, it's like a long slog to get all the way through Materia Medica. And I remember sort of thumbing through the case files, like here's aconite. I looked at some of the aconite cases and thought, pretty much what I'm saying, the important things seem to be in there. Now, what it was written from was what I had learned from Professor Vithoulkas and what I had seen from, Kent and Herring and all the other great homeopaths of history. And I was putting it all together, and the cases seemed more or less all right with that. And so I was pretty happy. But as I was going through Materia Medica, I would come across remedies that, gosh, there just wasn't really much written about. New remedies that not much was written about, and old remedies that maybe were not fully developed in our Materia Medica. As I progressed through the Materia Medica, I began to take a little bit more interest in these cured cases, and just began to play with the idea of using them more, especially in remedies where very little information was known. I was starting to look at these cases a little bit more carefully as I was going. And did you ever take a case where you got a pretty clear indication for which remedy it needed, but then the patient sort of went off on a whole set of symptoms that had nothing to do with the remedy that you decided to prescribe and which seemed clear? All sorts of information that just didn't fit into anything that you knew about that particular remedy. And, then the patient gets cured, and you're really happy with the case, and you present it to your class of students, and the students go, well, what about that part of the case? You didn't mention anything about that part of the case. And you go, well, there doesn't seem to be anything about that part of this person in this particular remedy. I don't know. And so that information, all those details, they kind of sink to the bottom. and then nobody really pays any attention to it. And the same thing happens in cured cases over and over again through all the journals, through all the lectures. We homeopaths, we tend to be very faithful to the truth. So we show the case in its entirety. We show the things that fit. We show the things that don't fit what we know. And then we just analyze how we do in order to get to how we got to the remedy. And that's kind of good enough. But what about all those symptoms that we didn't understand, that didn't seem to fit into the remedy? What's the place of all those symptoms? And that's what started to come through to me as I was studying these cases, at first haphazardly, and then with a little bit more seriousness. And as I started reading through the cases more and more for each remedy, what I found was the exact same statements from patient after patient, using exactly the same language, the same words sometimes, over and over again, many of which had seemingly nothing to do with what we knew about the remedy. And I started to take it more and more seriously over time.
Now, where you left us off with that is that there are all these little throwaway comments that clients give us in the clinic, things that we kind of like, we recognize the remedy, but then the client also said all these other things and it doesn't really fit in with the remedy, but we don't know what to do with it. So it kind of just gets pushed to the side. And that's what Clinically Verified Materia Medica is all about. But my first question was like, why do you think it took us 250 years to get inspiration to write this book?
You know what? I have no idea. It's, and it took me a long time as I was writing the book before I came to this. It was like kind of a revelation in a way. And once I realized the power of doing this and how much help it could bring the entire profession, I look back and I went, well, that's dumb. Why didn't we think of that already? It's like it was staring us in the face because, think of the work. The work of our profession. Every person publishing their cases, their cherished cases. You take a case with your whole heart and you write down every word. And sometimes the remedy jumps out at you. And when it does, it's going to work. And then you give that remedy and then it bears fruit. The patient, suffering is relieved. Tremendous suffering becomes relieved and the person transforms. And, Professor Vithoulkas has documented they go on to a deeper level of existence, a spiritual life and a life filled with love and understanding as opposed to a life filled with pain and neurosis and suffering, So, the miracle of it. And then because we love it so well and we love our patients, then we document it, we write it down, we make a case, we send it off to a journal, hoping that it's worthy to be published. And, and then it gets into a journal and we're so happy that we contributed. And then that case that you read, let's say it's a case of cola or a case of Gelsemium or something that, or something even rarer than Gelsemium that we don't see all the time. We may not see another case of that remedy for 10 years, or we may not even read another case in the journal of that remedy for years to come. So the details of what's in one case of Gelsemium and what's in another case of Gelsemium, they fade. Within a day, the symptoms are already fading. And within a year, you remember the main things. You remember maybe what you prescribed on, but you don't remember anything else.
Yes.
And so then when you set case after case after case, 40 cases of Gelsemium next to each other, and you begin to study them one at a time for each word, and you start seeing the same word come up in this case, the same theme came up in that case, and then another case, and pretty soon you realize that there's 4 or 5 themes of Gelsemium that nobody's ever seen before, just because you're studying them all together. And then once you did it, then you go, wow, why didn't I do that before? Why didn't anybody do that before? Of course, it was controversial whether we could even allow clinically cured symptoms into our Materia Medica. It was big fights in the beginning of homeopathy. Only the proven should go in. And then Dr. Heron, the father of American homeopathy, he was the first one that started to include clinically verified symptoms into his encyclopedia. But if you look at Allen's encyclopedia, only proving symptoms, no cured symptoms.
Isn't that so interesting? When you start that 15-minute video, you talk about how homeopathy is based on trust. It's a lot of trust because we have to trust that the materia medica that we're working from was done correctly.
And it wasn't.
Yeah.
There's tons of mistakes. And yet we have to at least trust that they tried to do it correctly, and that they put their all into it. And, so much of it has been verified. I mean, I don't take out too many symptoms out of what's, the known symptoms of materia medica, but there's a lot of additions, but there's a lot of things that, for example, since we're talking about gelsemium, one of the great keynotes of gelsemium, headache better from urination. Not a single case had that. Not a historic case, not a live, modern case. Simply didn't exist. There was one case that had a general aggravation from holding on to his urine too long, trying to hold back his urine so that he would get, but not headaches. And none of them got better from urinating.
See, that's the thing I found as well. So I have prescribed probably 50 times lac-caninum over my years. And one of the symptoms in there is that they don't want their legs to touch, or they don't they'll often sleep with a pillow between their legs.
Fingers.
I've asked that, probably the first, maybe 30 times, and not a single client said that they had issues with their legs touching. So I just stopped asking that question because I'm like, well, because I would use it as a confirmatory symptom, how you like with your legs touching. And they're like, oh, I'm fine. I'm like, okay. And then I asked it again and I asked it again. And I'm like, I cannot get this symptom verified in any of the cases that I'm actually treating. And yet they come back and they tell me that their menstrual pain's better. They feel better about themselves, all these other things. And I'm like, okay, well, that's strange. And so I started giving up on that symptom after a while.
And it may have been relevant at one time, but, even in the cured historic cases, which, we have about 100 historic cases of gelsemium in our literature. It didn't show up, and that's, so it clearly came up during approving. Somebody had that happen, and it's so unusual that people put it in, and that's why I call it homeopathy. I say that the danger is that it becomes an echo chamber. One prover, maybe, or two, I don't even know, had that symptom, or had the symptom for lac-caninum that they couldn't get their legs to touch. Also, it's a general symptom. They don't want their fingers to touch too. It's another symptom. So one person has it, and then it gets written into, the encyclopedias. And then every clinician who wants to write a book and has something to contribute, they put the same thing in. And so it becomes an echo chamber. There was no verification. That's why, at least by using clinical cases, it's not 100%. Believe me, I don't believe that this book is perfect. It's only the best effort I could make. It was, by using cured cases, we can clarify what's clinically relevant and what's not. And as you say, now one of the cases of lac-caninum had that symptom, none.
No.
So you were acute enough to notice that eventually. So you realize that, hey, that's not where the meat of this remedy is. But there is a meat of each remedy has a meat. There are symptoms that come up, and they're not necessarily always the keynotes. Every remedy has, for example, when I did Orem, I was amazed the consistency of people craving ice cream in Orem, more consistent than phosphorus, So it's listed somewhere that Orem, some cases had craving for ice cream, but when you see it, it's like, huge. And there were like 10 symptoms for almost every remedy. There's maybe 10 symptoms that are, no one case has all of them, but every case has some of these symptoms. Then whether you're dealing with a really good Orem case or Gelsemium case or whatever, or whether it's maybe sketchy or, because if you don't find any of those symptoms, then you start scratching your head like, is this really a good case to include in the remedy description?
Yeah, we've all had that.
Yeah, just nice to have had the opportunity to go through and really clarify what's clinically relevant and what's not. And to do that for everyone, excuse me for calling you young, but from my perspective, you're a young homeopath.
I'm happy to take that on. Thank you.
16 years, that's nothing.
It is. There's nothing. No, I know. I was like, my homeopath has been practicing for like 50 years. She's like 80 something now. So yeah, I'm a baby homeopath still.
Yeah. No, you're not a baby. So as I write this book, I'm thinking about people like you, honestly. Every moment that I'm writing it, should that symptom go in or shouldn't it? How should I explain that symptom so that it's most clear? How can I make it so it fits within the other information that I'm trying to give so that it jumps out at you and so that it's, easy for you to pick up exactly what I'm trying to say. I'm thinking about you.
Well, it's already worked because I have successfully prescribed Bufo recently in a case thanks to your book. Because the Materia Medica of Bufo is not very flattering. So you expect, I don't want to say it on the podcast because it's not very nice. Like you read the old Materia Medica of Bufo, not a very nice description. So you don't really know what that would look like in your clinic. In saying that, I did prescribe it about 10 years ago. I was very new. And to a little boy who fit that prescription perfectly with literally the tongue hanging out and the thick lips. And, there was not much going on upstairs. And maybe once or twice after that, but it's not one that I've prescribed very much. But looking at the Bufo in your Clinically Verified Materia Medica, it just gave me a different picture of this remedy, how there are actually some kids that are kind of like developmentally kind of quite normal almost. So it doesn't just have to be that picture because clinically it was used in these cases that did not look quite like how traditional Bufo Materia Medica would look like. But the things that stood out in the Clinically Verified was that these kids have they're kind of more single-minded. They have this idea, so they might look like they're not there, but it's just because in their mind, they are just really like stuck on this topic that they want to do. And then they're like just really silly on top of that. And so I'm like, okay, this child is like developmentally normal. You'd never say there's anything wrong with him, but he drives everyone nuts around him with the single-mindedness of this, the gaming that he loves. And all sorts of types of gaming. And I gave Bufo, and it has made such a difference. And the dad said within a couple of days of taking the remedy, this child, was like helping out without being asked. And he was like, just not being so silly, not making the silly sounds that he was making, and actually able to engage in conversations other than gaming. And I'm like, wow, I never would have thought of giving Bufo if it wasn't for Clinically Verified Materia Medica. And so I'm going to try not to get too excited because there's so many jewels in this book. But one of it is that you actually say what percentage of cases was men, what was women, and what was children, because a remedy will look different depending on the demographic and how many were old cases that you took it from and how many were modern cases. And I love that you differentiate that because then we, as the prescriber, can decide, okay, is this relevant? Is this helpful when I'm taking this into account? And, there were, I don't know, I can't remember now, I think maybe 13 cured cases, maybe for Bufo, and 2 of them were like completely developmentally normal. I'm like, okay, so there are normal kids that this remedy can give for, so I'm going to give it a go. And then I did, and it worked. So thank you.
Beautiful. Oh, it makes my heart sing to hear that.
Oh, it makes my heart sing to have like a happy patient. I just want to take a quick moment. So, because we are going to have this on YouTube and Rumble as well. I don't like to say YouTube because they deleted my channel in July last year. So I have to I don't know, can you see that okay? Just so people can see the beautiful layout of the book as well, because I think that's important. I like that you've got, the important things are in bold. You say the common name, there's the group that is from, the miasm that it's from as well. And it's just, anybody that's got any of your other books, the desktop guide or the therapeutics, will know your beautiful layout. So it does make it really easy to find the information that you're after. And then can we just talk about the sensation language that you used in there as well, because you had the same words that come up. And I love that because I find that people will use the same word no matter what they're using to describe something. The same word will come up, and sometimes you don't quite know what to do with that.
Right. Well, the sensation language is from the work from Rajan Sankran, of course. And don't tell him, but the second volume is going to be dedicated to him.
Oh, anyway. That's beautiful. Spoiler alert.
My other great teacher was Rajan. And I don't know whether you're a sensation prescriber or not. Have you studied with Rajan at all? Or?
A little bit, not directly. I've got his books. They're like right next to me, actually.
Oh, good. Well, the sensation is something that comes from Rajan's work. And it's sort of like a meta level. When you ask somebody how they feel, then they give you a bunch of, or what they're going through. They give you their experience. They give you their, you know what I'm saying? They give you their story of what's happened to them and so forth. But when you ask, the next question was, how did you experience that as a child? You go to a meta level. So then they say, you know, something like, well, it was devastating. Then you ask, well, what is devastating? And then they give a description like, you know, I went into a state of shock and I could hardly think. And I was, that's at that level, we call that the sensation level. That's straight from Rajan. Those words are extremely powerful. So when someone has taken the case at that level, at that depth, oftentimes we'll be getting down to just a handful of words. You know what I'm saying? It's just like 10 or 12 words can summarize the whole case. So that's sensation language that's from Rajan. So I try to document, and during the sensation case taking, we look a lot at gestures, physical gestures that the patients do, you know, like, I want to be connected. You know, when you do like that, that's very characteristic of the Malvalis group of plants. So that's something that Rajan has documented. So any of the gestures that were used to help suss out the case, then I try to put that in the sensation language as well. So for people that use Rajan's work, this is just documenting what the prescribers said were the sensation words in the case, and I'm just gathering those. So it's not exactly a clinical symptom because it's more just a description of a deep inner state. And so I have a chat, you know, not every remedy, because some remedies, no sensation remedy languages come up, but whenever I can, I put within the sensation language section exactly how the patients describe their life at that deep level.
Amazing. Were there any of the sensation languages from any of the remedies that really surprised you or that differed from what was in Rajan's work? Or was it quite consistent?
I don't think anything was different. Rajan was, you know, he was like a decade ahead of me in this regard. So I don't think I don't think there was anything, but it filled out in certain ways. And in some remedies, more patients had said more than what Rajan had gathered at the time he wrote his, you know, his insight into plants or whatever. So yes, there are things that go further than Rajan, because, you know, he's working from, the way it works with him is he sees a case, he feels the case so completely different, you know, at such a level of depth that those words imprint in him, and he can remember the sensation words of, even when he doesn't have any idea what he treated them for. You know, because that's what he's looking for, is the sensation level a lot of times. Now, of course, he remembers his case. He's got a brilliant memory, but he's speaking from his direct experience of those cases, but he's not looking at somebody else's cases to see what they may have said at the sensation level. So that's how I get to add in, you know, even on the sensation language, I get to add in a few words, a few choice words or phrases or whatever.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, were there any of the remedies that you felt differed quite a lot from the conventional Materia Medica? So once you compared what was clinically verified for this particular remedy, were there any that were quite different to how we would perceive it just using the conventional Materia Medica?
You know, the remedy camphor is an unbelievable remedy, really. I mean, the depth of that remedy and the suffering of that patient is unbelievable. In fact, Rajan had categorized that, you know, as an acute miasm remedy, but it's actually a deeply syphilitic remedy. Most of the patients were suicidal and, you know, just deeply disturbed. And what was interesting was most of the words, most of the language was in our Materia Medica, but it was so completely fragmented, you know, and you couldn't put it together. It was just like, it was almost like a word salad. If you go back and you read the mentals of camphor, certain phrases were deeply correct, but nothing put the whole thing together. So, like we know camphor is very chilly. We know that camphor has the sensation of cold even when it's, when the skin is warm to the touch. So sensations of cold are there. And we know from the provings that camphor has a deep feeling of isolation. But now put this together and what you see over and over again, the story of the matchbook child.
Oh,
That
Hans
story?
Christiansen, or what's his name?
Yeah, the little girl standing
Yes.
outside the window and the family is inside celebrating Christmas and eating a big meal, and she's outside looking in the frigid cold. That image is so deep for camphor. Read that remedy when you get a chance. It'll give you goosebumps, which no pun intended. But so where coldness has set into the very soul is the sensation level of camphor. So I knew I had cases of camphor, of course, few because it's not a very common remedy, but the depth of isolation. And when we see that together with this internal sensation, people dream over and over in camphor of running across fields of ice or being in snowstorms or whatever. So the coldness is but some cases don't even mention cold at all. But when they talk about their internal isolation, you feel cold when you're hearing it, as they describe their states. So it's such a deep remedy. And when you find a person so completely bereft that several of the patients said, I don't have a single friend. I don't have a single person to talk to, that kind of thing. I could go on about camphor for the rest of the time for another day, so I won't go too far.
I've got time.
Camphor was one. Well, if you want to, I've got camphors. Let me grab it. It's right here.
Great.
You may be sorry, like saying.
Oh, no, I won't be. I've got the whole day ahead of me. I was just going to do tidying today, so cleaning. So I'd much rather listen to you talk about camphor.
Okay, well, here, let me grab it. Okay.
I'm embarrassed to admit that I really have just used camphor as like a case opening remedy sometimes. Like I don't have any idea really of the deep, like constitutional, side of camphor. So I'm excited to hear.
Well, okay. So,
and maybe you should just tell us, because this was going to be my next question, is the amount of work that went into this book. Because I watched your full hour and a half or whatever video where you walk us through all the work involved in making this book. And I don't know, are those the filing cabinets behind you where all the paper cases are that you had in the video? Wow.
That's my right there.
So part of what my question is, and maybe you can work it into what you're going to tell us now, is just how the immense work that went into putting this work together, the immense torture that you had to go through with each remedy. And we'll use camphor as an example because you've got it there. So everyone will have to go watch on Rumble or on YouTube now to see the visual.
Well, okay. So each deeply cured case, is a miracle. It requires to appreciate the miracle of it. One, you appreciate the miracle of it, and you realize that your whole goal in life is to help people to achieve that same miracle in their own life. It's worth every ounce of effort, every case, every single time. It's worth that. You put your whole heart into it. And so I did the same thing in this writing. I put my whole heart into every single remedy. And so I didn't when I was first writing this book, I think you've heard this story. I just used these cases, which we collected over, 40 years of career, 45 years of career. I used them very casually. I was just because I knew what camphor was, I knew all sorts of keynote symptoms for camphor, cold better from cold. And so some egotistical part thought he really knew what camphor was. And so at the very beginning, I was just looking at the cases just for confirmation, oh yeah, there's that keynote I put down, it's yeah, did I leave any keynotes out? That was kind of the level I was doing that. But once I had started really studying these cases, so you can see, here's case number 1 from Melissa Fairbanks, dear friend, wonderful homeopath, trained in Britain. So you can see here, everything's in green, pink, and yellow. And that corresponds, the pink is the mental symptoms, the green is the physical symptoms, and the yellow is the general symptoms. So weather, temperature, food cravings, sleep pattern, all that's general.
And you've got, just a second, you've got like 10,000 of those printed, right? Or like 15,000 of those cases physically printed in those cabinets behind you.
Exactly.
That's like next level.
Yeah, and there's, for the farther end of the alphabet, because a lot of them I collect on the internet from electronic journals, and, people write me with their cases, and I just put those directly onto the computer. I don't print them out until I'm working on them.
Wow.
So there's 15,000 cases in those files, but there's probably another 5,000 cases sitting on the computer.
I'm going to guess at least like a third of those is just A, B, and C remedies, right? We've got a lot of A's, B's, and C's in homeopathy for some reason. A lot of remedies that start with A, B, and C.
Exactly 1/3 of them are A through E, because this book is A through E.
Yeah, and I'm not happy because I was at E and it said
I hope it's 1/3, because I don't know for sure, because it could be more. It could be either I could run out of space and never be able to do a 3rd volume. I don't think that's going to happen, but maybe I need a 4th volume. I hope that doesn't happen to me. Anyway, so once I've gone through the cases, then I've marked out which category the symptoms are. Then you can see I go back through and I start circling. Those are places where I've already seen that in another case. So I circle what's going to be a common symptom. So all through, you see points where it's circled, and then what you start to see is like little notations, like this is another case that had that symptom. And then, as I go through, I start. So this was the first case that I studied, and I do these by age. So this is the youngest person, and then I go upwards. There's a lot of reasons for that. But you can see, like, as I'm going through, here's case 5, and the same thing happening, but you see cases are listed. Case 1 is listed right here. I just put a little notation. That case has that same symptom. And then as I go through, then once I've been through it enough times where I feel like I've mapped out all the symptoms that are in each case, then I go to these sheets. So this is depression, and out of those cases, all of these, the main chief complaint was depression. Or then next is not close to anyone. These 3 cases were not close to anybody, didn't have any friends or relatives they were close through. These were had the word lonely as a strong point. So each word I go through and I'll collect it. Then once I've collected all these, so here you can see the word isolated, like I was telling you about how many, almost every case, it's like so heartbreaking.
So we need a lot more camphor these days, because there's definitely a lot of isolated, lonely, depressed people out there.
I've used it a lot more since I've written the chapter. And so then I take it down. So then I go through and I make a main category, aloneness. So how the book is broken down, there's like aloneness might be a bold section. So these are all symptoms related to being alone and all the remedies that had it. So once I realized that that's a characteristic of the remedy, aloneness, then I go back through and so alone became the very first most important symptom for the remedy.
Well, if you keep talking, Roger, I'm just going to flick through this part of camphor so people can have a look at the book as well while they hear you talking.
Okay, great. And so then I have all of these symptoms under aloneness and all the remedies, each case that has that symptom. Then as I decide to write about aloneness for camphor, I go back and I pull all of those cases up and I read through each one of the cases as I'm writing that section. I just take all the aloneness remedy, all the aloneness cases, I put them together and I read through all the things that they said about it as I'm formulating what I'm trying to say about it. And then I just sort of let the patient's words write the book. That's the best way I could say it, is I'm trying to channel basically what that group of patients meant about aloneness and put it as close to their words as possible. Mostly I use their exact words. Sometimes I take exact quotes out when they're particularly, and then I put that in. Once I've done aloneness as much as I can and as well as I can, I move into the next symptom, which is the sensation of non-existence in camphor. So then I choose all those cases that have that feeling of non-existence, and I do the same thing over again, and I write it down as best I can. And then I move on to the next section. Once I've done all the emotional things, then I move on to, like the general section, the physical symptoms, and I do the exact same thing. I find every case that had, and if over a third of the cases had a particular symptom, then it gets bold type.
Amazing.
And that's how I make the decisions. Just how often did it come up?
Yeah.
And then if I make a list, like here are the dreams that camphor patients had, I start from the most common dream, like maybe 10 patients had a dream of snow and ice. And then maybe 5 patients had another dream that was somehow whatever. And then, so it's every time you see a list in the book, the most common is first and the least common is last. So that you can get an idea, like, should I really be looking for this, or is this something that maybe happens, but you don't have to base your whole case on it?
I know, that's what I love. I feel like you put the power back in our hands to help us decide what we want to do with that information, because you've got the numbers there. So then I can decide, okay, this is a big enough symptom for me to put weight on or not. I love that.
Yeah.
Also, you are really lucky to be married to a homeopath, because if you were married to somebody who was in any other profession, they would not be happy with you spending this ridiculous amount of time and this unbelievable obsession to get this correct. You would have been single a long time ago if she wasn't a homeopath.
That's for sure. There are moments when, she's had enough. And of course, as you know, if you've taken a case deeply, any patient, if they're suffering a lot, you come away with some of that suffering inside you. When you're reading 20 cases of camphor, you are overcome by camphor. Your bones become camphor.
Like approving it, reading it.
It's even deeper than approving, because it's like you go into the state of camphor exactly, and it's, of course, that's not optimal when you're married.
But if they understand kind of what's happening, the process of it all, that's.
She has to put up with a lot, and so I try to do a lot of it when she's asleep.
Okay.
So I about 3 nights a week, I wake up at 2 a.m. and I work through the night. Yeah.
Wow. And do you have...
Otherwise, I wouldn't have time for a family. I had to cut down my patient practice too, which was tough.
Do you just feel all the great masters? I see you've got lots of photos on your walls there. Do you feel all those great masters sitting in the room with you, like tapping you on, go, Roger, go, you can do this, you can do this?
Totally. And, anytime I think about, like, I got close enough, and then I turn around from my computer and there's like the whole wall of them looking at me and go, well, maybe I didn't get it quite good enough.
I love it. They're going to come haunt you if you don't get this right.
It's both the carrot and the stick, for sure.
Just reading this book, I feel that they've been channeled as well, and like using you to correct some of the mistakes that they've made in the past with the information that they've put through. Because, you even said that the second you finished writing Desktop Guide, all this new information came up. And so what do you do then? Because that was published, in 94 or something, 96?
Yeah, exactly.
And so you're like, well, it's in print now. I can't change that. And same with these guys, Keen to all of them. They're like, well, they put that out there, but they can't change it now. So it sounds to me like they're like using you, channeling through you. Okay, fix our mistakes.
Totally. And, a lot of the old cases just are in my mind from reading them so many times, so many years. So a lot of times things will just start to click when I'm seeing something in a new case and I'm remembering something that Kent said, and suddenly it all comes together. And one lovely thing is that as I'm doing this, and I really understand so many cases that I failed on, like they go, oh my God, camphor, I should have given him camphor. And I'm looking up people that I haven't seen for a decade. Sometimes it's hard to get the name, it's like, what the hell was that person's name? How can I get a hold of them? Then when I do, and I'm prescribing the remedies that came through so clearly, I mean, they're writing me and saying, oh my God, why didn't you give me that remedy before? Because that was the one, So it's a chance to, even cases I'm working on, a lot of times cases that I'm studying hard, I'll realize I'm writing this exact remedy. The coincidence, just beyond coincidence.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful though when you're in flow, there just seems to be all these coinkydinks, I like calling them.
When you're working hard on your cases, homeopathy gives you a break. If you just have that determination that you're going to find the remedy this time, the door's open.
It really does. So my other huge question is, how did you decide which remedies to put in the book and which to leave out? Because I'm sure that was a nightmare in itself.
No, it was simple. Any remedy that had 3 cured cases, modern cured cases, got included in the book.
Okay. Because there were a few remedies that I had never heard of. And you had a few bird remedies in there that I loved because my good friends, Reita Poyoinen and Janie Lavelle, they've done a lot of provings on birds. And I saw you had Ara Macau, which they've proved as well, and Corvus corax and Buteo jamaicensis. So it's great that there's some bird remedies in there too, but I think that's Jeremy Shaw's influence on you, right?
Oh, yeah. No, Jeremy. You probably saw my little, basically, homage to Jeremy in the introductory part. Yeah. But he's one of the people I admire the most in homeopathy. And I just happen to be working on Haliaethus right now. I had already written it, but I'm going back for a second dip because I found more cases and I'm
second dip.
Haliaethus.
I love that. No pun intended. Well, actually, I was a little bit annoyed at you about that because I went all the way through to E and then it said eagle, C. Haliaethus. I'm like, but it's H. That's in the next book, so I can't see it. That was a bit mean.
Sorry about that. If you want it, I'm going to be finished with it probably by next week. I can send you a copy.
Oh, please. That'll be amazing. I've been prescribed that in the past, quite a while ago.
Oh, yeah. You know that remedy.
I love it. It's beautiful. And I just love eagles anyway. I think they're my spirit animal. And you also said there's no lacs in there and there's no crystals in there, because I think if you were to include those, I don't think you would ever be able to finish these books.
I have all the lacs.
Oh, you do? There was something else, and there was the crystals and something.
I didn't have crystals. I didn't put in the lanthanides.
Oh, lanthanides was the one.
I didn't put in the bowel nosodes. Things that I don't know well. Other people can do it better. Why I shouldn't, But I'd love to do everything, but it's like in the interest of using my energy well, it's better to use remedies that I'm,
Absolutely.
that I understand. So there's a lot of things that I didn't put in most of the imponderables, only the ones where I could find enough documentary cases, and then I did, but yeah.
I love that you've got some drug remedies in there too, because I'm seeing a lot of drug remedy cases come through these days as well. It just because everyone's so dissociated. So I think that's probably why.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. And, it comes through to me just more and more that we have to realize that we cannot be experts in homeopathy ever. I think it's so ignorant for any of us to think that we can be an expert in all areas of homeopathy, because it's just too much. And so it's actually kind of beautiful because it forces us to collaborate and it forces us to draw on each other's knowledge and help each other. And it's actually great when you can say, okay, this is what I'm going to stick with because this is where my energy is best spent, because doing those other things that you don't perhaps naturally resonate with, we all have our set of remedies that we resonate with, and you'd be lying if you say you don't. We all do. If you go see Peter Talmanella, you're probably going to get a crystal remedy. If you see Patricia Haller, you probably, but then we attract those, those clients attract us what they need, they will get from us, and then once we can't help them anymore, they'll go to somebody else, and that's okay.
Totally. You have to follow, in this field, more than any other field, you have to follow your gut instincts, follow your truth, and it will serve you. Yeah.
Okay, so give us some teasers for book 2 and book 3, and also the dates of when you think, although it might be, you have to be careful giving us dates because we're all going to be hounding you if you don't stick to it. Give us some ideas.
Which I appreciate, because I need the encouragement. Book 2, I'm about 2/3 of the way done, volume 2. And I expect it to be finished approximately a year from now. And then, there's always, but I'm working simultaneously, which I didn't do in the first book. So each letter that I finished, so I finished F and G, and, partway done with H. I finished all of the I, J, K, and half of L already. So as I'm finishing, I'm having my editor come through and do the full editing so that by the time I'm finished writing, which will probably be, I think Nux Vomica will be the last, but it could be Nymphaea.
Good one to finish up on, Nux Vomica.
I'm going to finish up on Nux Vomica.
Very appropriate.
And I think then that book will be out just over a year from now.
Amazing. That's very smart, getting your editor to kind of because you can do it with us, finish that off. That's very smart.
And my editor, Julie, is a homeopath as well, and a very fine one. And she's, without her, I'd be lost. I'd be sunk, but without Nancy also. But then book 3, the final volume, which will be O through Z, I think 3 years further before that's done. And then that will probably, depending on how thick it turns out to be, it will probably have some indexes so that, because one of the exciting things now that I'm doing Haliaethus again, I realize I pretty much got the raptors done. By H, all the raptors are there. There's vulture, I guess, but, I'm not even sure if I have enough cases of vulture to include. So I'm already planning out, like a detailed comparison for all of the raptors and the bird remedies, and then all of the second row remedies and all of the, the Malvallies and so forth. So I'm going to do a detailed index at some point. Whether that gets included in volume 3, that may just become part of like a fourth or a companion volume, something like that.
Wow. Well, you'll have to do it. You'll have to do it quickly because the longer you wait, the more new cases people are going to be sending you to include in there.
Terrible. The worst thing is I finished a remedy that I just struggle with, and I needed one more good case. And then after it's already completely finished and edited and everything, then I get another new case. Somebody sends me a case. And then I'm going to Julie pleading, but I got one more case. Can't we just add just one sentence? No.
I hope she's got good boundaries also.
It'll make a difference. Somebody's life will be changed by this, Julie. And she goes, all right, but don't ask me again.
Oh, my goodness. It sounds like you've got...
She just wants to make sure it's really important before she...
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, where can people around the world get your book? Because I know your clinic actually sells the book as well. So that's where I got mine from. So
we're still building up all the infrastructure, the web pages and so forth. So we're just finishing a web page for Hahnemann Clinic Publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're just getting to a core. We're going to call it the gift of homeopathy, or just gift of homeopathy, because it's both the gift that we're giving to you, and homeopathy is a gift all by itself, So giftofhomeopathy.com is going to be our central page. And then that'll have links to the publishing company. And then that's where, you'll be able to just order it and it'll come automatically from Amazon or something like that. Horrible. But anyway, expedient.
A necessary evil.
But right now, you just go to our main website for the clinic, HerrickMorrison.com. I put her first.
Good man.
Hey, she's, in homeopathy, she's really underrated. She's about the best homeopath I know besides maybe George and Rajan.
Oh.
She's like heads and shoulders over me. So herrickmorrison.com, and then just go to our publication page, and that'll give you all the details how to get us. But it's also going to, all of your favorite booksellers are going to have it as well. So.
Mm-hmm. The quality of the book is just amazing. I mean, anybody who also has a therapeutics book, they'll know, though they will have the same amazing quality. I really like the silver print. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
As well. It really stands out. It's gorgeous. So this is, I mean, if you think that this one's been on my desk for literally 15 years, it actually looks pretty good. Hey, like just because of the quality of the,
You should see some that I get asked to autograph. They're just falling into tatters. I feel like giving them a new one, but they've got all their notes in it. So you can't do anything about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, amazing.
Yeah. But no, that one looks pretty good. That shows that you're careful with your books.
Yeah. Well, you can see the brown, like it's, the lighting isn't great, but you can see like where the, from all the use. So the fingers and might be a couple of coffee stains on there as well. But yeah, it goes everywhere with me.
You're honoring me. Okay.
Roger, thank you for this gift that you have given homeopathy and the sacrifice that you have made to produce this gift for all of us to use for, centuries to come.
And it's been the greatest privilege of my life, homeopathy in general, and this book in particular. It's given me more back than I've given it.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to have you on.
Oh, thank you for saying. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.